On the 47th year of my widowhood, my husband, who was supposed to have died in battle, suddenly appeared. I burst into tears in his arms, but he awkwardly pushed me away. "LinShan, I have remarried." I stopped crying and only then noticed that there were many people standing behind Qi JinHong. A radiant woman clung to his side, along with 3 young men who looked exactly as he did when he was younger. Filled with grief and anger, I burned the entire house and the chastity archway bestowed by the emperor in a fit of rage. Ding! RoyalStory reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day of my wedding. I looked around dazedly at everything. Red silkworm curtains, dragon and phoenix red candles. Phoenix coronet and bridal veil, wedding dress like fire. This was clearly the scene of my wedding. Everything before my eyes seemed both familiar and strange. With a creak, the door was pushed open, and amidst the cheerful laughter of the servants, Qi JinHong approached me with the wedding wine. He dismissed the maids and stood before me, smiling like a spring breeze. "LinShan, I have finally brought you home." I stared blankly at the man before me. It was indeed the young Qi JinHong. At this moment, his brows were filled with emotion, his eyes were as gentle as water, and brimming with affection. He wore a red brocade coronet and red wedding attire, just like the handsome and bright youth I remembered. I shook my head. Was it all just a dream? Seeing me staring in a daze, Qi JinHong tapped my nose, chuckled softly, and handed the wedding wine to me, leaning in closer. "What do you think? Does your husband look handsome to you?" My cheeks felt a bit warm, and an inexplicable sense of panic welled up in my heart. This conversation was too familiar, making me feel like someone was about to burst in and announce that the enemy had invaded and Qi JinHong must leave tonight. Just as I thought this, an urgent knock sounded on the door, breaking the somewhat intimate atmosphere in the room. "General! General, it's urgent. An 800-mile emergency. The rebel forces from the western region are amassing heavily, the barbarians intend to invade the east. The emperor commands you to leave immediately for the border to fend off the enemy." The wedding wine in my hand fell to the ground, shattering the teacup into pieces. It wasn't a dream, none of it was a dream. I had truly returned to my wedding day. Qi JinHong would leave, and after tonight, we would never see each other again. He would marry someone else, have children and grandchildren, while I would spend my life in a daze, clinging to a painting of him and his empty promises. Qi JinHong's expression turned serious instantly. He rushed toward the door but suddenly returned, as if he had thought of something. He grabbed my hand, looking at me with burning eyes. "LinShan, wait for me to come back." He desperately wanted to hug me, but I, having come to my senses, pushed him away with my elbow. Qi JinHong looked at me, full of confusion. I coldly pushed his hand aside. Life and death are determined by fate, wealth and honor are in the hands of heaven. Qi JinHong, stop making such irresponsible remarks. Take back your empty promises. Whether you live or die this time, I will marry again. Qi JinHong, still trying to process my words, was pulled away by Deputy General Zhao, who had rushed in. As he was leaving, he kept shouting for me to wait for him. After they all hurried away, the once lively general's mansion suddenly fell silent, as if the previous excitement and noise had all been an unrealistic dream. I took off my heavy wedding dress and called Xiaozhu in to help me remove my makeup. In my previous life, I stayed with the Qi family, held onto this house, never had a day of peace, and ruined Xiaozhu's life as well. Fortunately, heaven has given me another chance to start over. This time, I will change everyone's fate. Xiaozhu, my dowry maid, carefully removed my hairpins and jade ornaments, comforting me as she did so. "Miss, don't worry. This sudden event will pass, and the young master will surely return soon after defeating the enemy." I smiled without saying a word. He won't come back. Qi JinHong will never come back. This battle lasted half a year. Although the Yu Kingdom won, it came at a heavy cost. Qi JinHong's army was ambushed at LinShan Pass, suffering heavy losses. Tens of thousands of soldiers were trapped. If it weren't for the timely arrival of Prince Shen with reinforcements, the battle at LinShan Pass would have been a terrible defeat, shaking the very foundation of the country. However, when Prince Shen arrived with reinforcements, the battlefield was already in chaos. Our army suffered heavy casualties, and Qi JinHong was nowhere to be found. Everyone believed he had died in battle. There were rumors that Qi JinHong fought valiantly until the last moment, was captured by the enemy, refused to surrender, and was eventually tortured to death. Prince Shen brought back his blood-stained armor. Enduring our grief, my mother-in-law and I erected a memorial for him. The current emperor, pitying the Qi family's generations of loyalty and valor, and that the sole heir of 3 generations also died for the country, posthumously titled Qi JinHong as the General of Western Defense and granted my mother-in-law any honorary titles. I had supreme honor, but this honor also imprisoned me for life. But who would have thought, 47 years later, Qi JinHong not only returned but had married another woman, had children and grandchildren, and lived a happy and fulfilling life. I, however, was trapped in this deep mansion, wasting a lifetime, and eventually perished in the fire, ending in hatred. What's more hateful is that my father-in-law and mother-in-law, whom I served devotedly for a lifetime, knew about this but never told me. Now that I think about it, the battle at LinShan Pass might have had some issues. Otherwise, if Qi JinHong didn't die in battle, why didn't he appear all these years? If my father-in-law and mother-in-law knew he was alive, why would they tolerate their only son being lost outside? In an instant, a bold thought flashed through my mind, making me tremble with anger. The heavy losses at LinShan Pass, the tens of thousands of soldiers dying in battle, could it all have been caused by Qi JinHong? Xia Zhu, thinking I was cold, quickly brought in a cloak. "Miss, are you cold? It's better to get into bed soon. I will help you rest." I grabbed Xia Zhu's hand. "I remember you have a cousin who works for Prince Shen. The Prince Shen has been stationed at the border for years, and this time he has returned to the capital for a ritual. He is currently in the capital city." Xia Zhu looked at me, puzzled, and then nodded seriously. "Yes, my cousin is a guard at the Prince Shen's residence and is somewhat trusted by the prince." I didn't dare to act rashly, but I couldn't just ignore it either. After all, in the Battle of LinShan Pass, many soldiers lost their lives, and many families were torn apart because of it. At this point, my only hope lies with the Prince Shen. I tried to recall everything related to the prince, picked up a pen, and wrote a letter, then handed it to Xia Zhu. "I have something important to tell the Prince Shen. Please ask your cousin to make sure this letter reaches the prince's hands." By the time I finished everything, it was already late at night. I pushed open the window, the scent of earth wafted in, and I realized it had started to drizzle outside. I closed my eyes, letting the fine rain fall on my face. The cool touch inevitably brought a sense of comfort. In my past life, I was immersed in the pain of losing Qi JinHong, waiting and resenting for a lifetime, not realizing how delightful the summer drizzle could be. Looking up inadvertently, I saw a dark figure standing on a tree not far away. The shadow stared straight at me, almost scaring me into screaming. As our eyes met, the shadow flew towards me, then performed a flip, landing lightly in front of me. I steadied my nerves. To appear in my courtyard so openly at this hour without being detected, it could only be the legendary Prince Shen, Shenhanqin. I remembered Qi JinHong once told me that Shenhanqin and the emperor were born of the same mother and had very similar faces but vastly different temperaments. He said the emperor was benevolent and kind to his people, while Shenhanqin was ruthless, bloodthirsty, and violent, a figure as terrifying as a ghost. As he spoke, there was undisguised disdain on Qi JinHong's face. But I thought otherwise. Shenhanqin had never lost on the battlefield, scaring the enemy, and for over a decade, he guarded the Yu Kingdom people in harsh lands. Though I feared him, I also respected him. Thinking of this, I gathered my courage and stepped forward to salute. "This servant woman greets the prince." Shenhanqin didn't look at me, just turned the thumb ring on his finger, his voice cold and devoid of warmth. "Does Madam know the consequences of spreading false information to disrupt the army?" I knew Shenhanqin referred to my letter, so I looked up to meet his gaze. "I did not spread false information and only informed the prince alone." "How can this disrupt the army?" Shenhanqin raised an eyebrow at me, stepping closer, his eyes filled with chilling intent. "Oh. Then you might as well tell me, what does it mean that LinShan Pass failed, and 50,000 elite soldiers died?" His fierce gaze frightened me. I stepped back, almost tripping over the steps. "The literal meaning. This time the battle will drag on until winter, and in the end, your kingdom will suffer heavy losses, with 50,000 soldiers perishing. So I boldly asked the prince to save these soldiers. JinHong sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. If I remember correctly, the Qi family's brat recently led his troops out, right? Newlywed, you must be reluctant to see him go to war? No, my actions were not for Qi JinHong, he is unworthy. Hearing this, JinHong raised an eyebrow at me. Oh. Then why should I believe you? I raised my head to meet JinHong's probing eyes. Because of the declaration I submitted. Doesn't the prince want to know how you will die? It wasn't until JinHong's figure disappeared into the night that I breathed a sigh of relief. His departing gaze was truly frightening. If looks could kill, I would have been crushed to dust by now. Perhaps the advantage of being reborn is knowing many things in advance, which is my only bargaining chip with JinHong. My brother holds a position in the court, and in my previous life, I heard bits and pieces about JinHong from him. 2 years after the battle at LinShan Pass, JinHong also died in a battle. The emperor was deeply grieved, avoiding court for 3 days to mourn his brother. People in the streets praised the royal brotherly love and realized belatedly that the ruthless prince had guarded the border his whole life. But in my previous life, I paid little attention to these things, only vaguely remembering my brother saying JinHong seemed to have died an unnatural death. After JinHong's death in battle, his body was transported back to the capital. My brother, an official in the Ministry of Rights, was responsible for the funeral arrangements and discovered signs of poisoning on the body. He reported this to the court but drowned one night. I thought it was an accident, wept for 3 days, and then buried my brother. JinHong's suspected poisoning was left unresolved. Upon reflection, JinHong might not have died in battle, and my brother's death wasn't an accident either. So I told JinHong that he would be poisoned to death in 2 years, urging him to be wary of those around him. After a long standoff, JinHong turned and vanished into the night. I didn't know how much he believed me, but after that night, I never saw him again. They said he left the capital for the southern border right after the ritual. Days returned to their usual monotony, with my mother-in-law dragging me to recite scriptures and pray daily, hoping for Qi JinHong's safe return. However, whenever I looked at her, my heart was filled with resentment. Qi JinHong and I were betrothed from a young age. After my parents passed away, the Duan family gradually declined, and my mother-in-law considered breaking off the engagement. It was Qi JinHong who insisted on marrying me. My brother, fearing I'd be mistreated, prepared a generous dowry and even dipped into his own savings for me. Later, after Qi JinHong went missing in the Battle of LinShan Pass, I devotedly served my parents-in-law, managed the household, and supported the general's mansion with my dowry. Yet, my mother-in-law did not appreciate my efforts. She constantly blamed me for Qi JinHong's misfortune, claiming I was the cause of his presumed death. One day, she unexpectedly went to the palace to request a chastity archway for me, ostensibly to honor my unwavering devotion. On the day the emperor bestowed the chastity archway, my brother stayed up all night, his eyes red with worry about my future. But I naively thought my mother-in-law was moved by my sincerity. In hindsight, it seems she knew Qi JinHong was still alive but kept it from me, making me serve them like a fool for years. I secretly had people monitor my father-in-law and mother-in-law's every move. I wasn't sure if things would change this lifetime because of JinHong, but I couldn't sit idly by and be manipulated. If Qi JinHong was alive, he would definitely try to contact his parents. This time, I wouldn't let them succeed. As the weather grew colder each day, bringing the cold winds sweeping through the long streets, good news came from the battlefield. The front line reported continuous victories, with Qi JinHong's forces pushing the enemy back relentlessly. The emperor was overjoyed, showering the general's mansion with rewards. People frequently came to congratulate us, almost breaking down the Qi family's door with well wishes. For a time, we basked in much glory. Mother-in-law couldn't stop smiling, telling everyone how proud she was of Qi JinHong for bringing honor to the Qi family. She subtly hinted that I was incredibly fortunate to have married into the Qi family. Though I echoed my mother-in-law's sentiments absent-mindedly, my heart was in turmoil. Over these months, I had sent several letters to JinHong, but I received no reply. I knew this was a protracted battle, the enemy's intent was likely to stall for time. The war had dragged on for over 4 months, with the Yu Kingdom's army advancing steadily. The next stop was LinShan Pass, and soon news of tens of thousands of soldiers being trapped there would arrive. In the previous life, when news of Qi JinHong's death came, I didn't believe it and went to LinShan Pass myself. The terrain was steep, surrounded by mountains, forming a natural pit. If the enemy ambushed at LinShan Pass, luring Qi JinHong into a trap and blocking all exits, the soldiers would be sitting ducks once the winter snow sealed the mountains. If Shen Hanqin didn't believe me and waited for the imperial edict to rescue, as he did in the previous life, it would be too late for the soldiers. Anxious and helpless, I decided to head to LinShan Pass myself. I requested to leave the capital on the pretext of delivering winter clothes to Qi JinHong. My mother-in-law, unexpectedly, gave me a rare smile and even prepared a cartload of food, repeatedly urging me to ensure it reached her son. I agreed expressionlessly. I wasn't heading to LinShan Mountain Pass for Qi JinHong. If he recklessly endangered the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers, I wouldn't hesitate to take his life myself. I rode hard with 2 guards, traveling day and night to reach the western border as quickly as possible. By the time I arrived, it was nearly dark, and the barbarian army were jeering at the city gate. The sky was overcast, dark clouds pressing down, as if a blizzard was imminent. Inside the tent, Qi JinHong was fiercely arguing with his deputy general Zhao. He had 3 deputy generals, 2 of whom wanted to launch a night attack to annihilate the barbarians completely. Only Zhao Wuzhen advised against it fervently. As I stepped into the tent, a teacup flew at me. I dodged, and it shattered at my feet, with Qi JinHong's angry voice resounding throughout the tent. It's settled. The army will march tonight. Anyone who speaks another word of nonsense will be punished by military law. The 2 deputy generals exchanged pleased glances and left, while Zhao Wuzhen followed them dejectedly. When I locked eyes with one of the effeminate-looking deputy generals, I felt I had seen him somewhere before. But I had no time to waste. As I brushed past Zhao Wuzhen, I deliberately bumped into him, silently mouthing, "Work with me," under his puzzled gaze. "JinHong." I took a deep breath, softly calling out as I walked toward Qi JinHong. Hearing my voice, he turned around, his face showing clear surprise, a hint of delight, and a trace of unease. "LinShan, why are you here?" I didn't care why Qi JinHong seemed uneasy, I simply collapsed into his arms. If firmness didn't work, I had to be soft. With his current success, Qi JinHong wouldn't heed any contrary opinions. I had to find another way to stop him. Childhood sweethearts for over a decade, newly married, I bet Qi JinHong still has feelings for me. Seeing me faint, the guard behind hurriedly spoke up. "Madam has been worried about the general, traveling day and night, she hasn't closed her eyes for several days now." Qi JinHong hastily picked me up and put me on the bed, then turned around to call for the army doctor. I opened my eyes, pretending to be weak, and grabbed Qi JinHong's hand. "JinHong, I feel so unwell, could you stay with me tonight?" Qi JinHong hesitated for a moment but then gently removed my hand. "LinShan, I can't stay tonight. Be good and rest. I'll stay with you when I return victorious, all right?" I clutched Qi JinHong's sleeve and pouted. "But it's about to snow soon. What if the cunning nomads ambush you and trap you at LinShan Pass? I'm worried about you." Hearing this, Qi JinHong laughed. "LinShan, you are a woman, you don't understand military strategies. Don't speak nonsense. Besides, LinShan Pass is insignificant. Your husband doesn't even consider it a challenge. Just wait and see, after tonight, I will be the greatest general in Yu Kingdom, rivaling even the Prince Shen." I was thoroughly worried. Qi JinHong's greed for glory and stubbornness made him believe he could rival the Prince Shen, and now he wouldn't listen to anything. Outside the tent, the soldiers' anxious urging voices sounded again, and Qi JinHong turned to leave. In desperation, I picked up the candlestick on the table and knocked Qi JinHong unconscious, trying to create the illusion of a passionate night. Inside the warm tent, I pretended to gasp softly and moved awkwardly, casting a shadow on the tent wall. The soldiers outside were startled and whispered among themselves, but none dared to intrude on Qi JinHong's moment. Vice General Zhao immediately ordered strict defenses for the night, no one was to leave the city, battles postponed. With the blizzard approaching, the barbarians dared not linger outside the city. Surviving tonight could save the soldiers' lives. But I had overlooked one thing. The two scheming vice-generals wouldn't miss such a rare opportunity tonight. Outside, the cold wind howled, and small snowflakes began to fall. Seeing Qi JinHong hadn't come out for a long time, the two vice-generals lost their patience. They came to the tent and repeatedly urged Qi JinHong to come out, but got no response. They wanted to force their way in but were stopped by Vice-General Zhao. A fierce fight ensued. Vice-General Zhao was overpowered and pinned to the ground by the two. When they rushed into the tent, they saw Qi JinHong unconscious and me, fully dressed, not a hair out of place. One of the vice-generals screamed, eyes wide with rage, pulling out his sword and pointing it at me. "Traitor!" Zhao Wuzhen and this woman conspired to harm the general. "Seize them!" I grabbed a sword beside me and stood my ground. "I dare you! I am the general's wife. Who dares to touch me?" Everyone looked at each other, hesitant, just as Qi JinHong woke up. A chilling voice came from behind. "Duan LinShan, what are you trying to do?" I turned to face Qi JinHong. "I'm trying to save you. If I tell you the barbarians have set a trap at LinShan Pass, and you will die, and the entire army will perish, will you believe me?" The snow fell harder, and the wind howled outside, while inside, it was eerily quiet. The vice-general's eyes showed obvious panic. Before they could speak, Qi JinHong sneered. He stood up, eyes cold, and approached me, gripping my neck, forcing me to step back. "Die? What do you know? Do you know I've won 5 consecutive battles? Do you know how much I've sacrificed to get here? Duan LinShan, by tomorrow, you'll see who the greatest general in Yu Kingdom is. Men! Lock up her and Zhao Wuzhen. I want them to see with their own eyes how I destroy the barbarians." Qi JinHong released me, throwing me to the ground, and left with his sword. Desperately, I shouted. "Qi JinHong, if you want to die, die alone. Don't drag innocent people with you." Slap! My face burned with pain as Qi JinHong slapped me. He glared at me, eyes red with fury, like a raging beast on the verge of madness. "Duan LinShan, if you insist, don't blame me for forgetting our marriage." The clashing of weapons, the desperate cries, the cold wind seemed to wail in sorrow, an unending dirge throughout the night. The army departed en masse. Zhao Wuzhen and I were tied up and thrown into the woodshed, my screams falling on deaf ears. It was bitterly cold at night. I huddled in a corner, shivering, my face stinging with pain, likely swollen. I stared blankly at the sky, turning from darkness to light until the first rays of dawn pierced the tent. I closed my eyes in despair. The army did not return overnight. They were likely trapped at LinShan Pass. The blizzard would last 3 days and nights. The army would be trapped for 3 days and nights. Apart from Qi JinHong, who might escape, none of the soldiers would survive. I collapsed on the ground, tears uncontrollably streaming down my cheeks. So, living through another lifetime, I still couldn't change anything? The door suddenly burst open, and a cold wind sent a shiver down my spine. A figure slowly walked toward me, blocking the light before me. I struggled to keep my eyes open. "Why has you made yourself so disheveled?" The soft voice in my ear seemed like a light piercing through the darkness, igniting a glimmer of hope within me. "It's Shinhan. He's finally here." I reached out and grabbed the hem of Shinhan's robe. "Your Highness, Qi JinHong led the army to attack LinShan Pass last night, but the barbarian had already set up an ambush. Now they are likely facing a grim situation. Please, Your Highness, save the soldiers." Shinhan squatted down slowly, meeting my gaze. "I've always been curious, how do you know all this?" I licked my dry lips, feeling dizzy and barely able to hold on. "It doesn't matter how I know, what matters is that if you don't go, it will be too late, everyone will die. Qi JinHong has fled, only you can save them, only you." Before I could finish, everything went black and I lost consciousness. Before hitting the ground, a pair of hands caught me in time. I was lifted into the air, held in someone's arms, a cloak wrapped around me. As my head rested against his chest, it felt like something wet brushed against my face, accompanied by the scent of blood. I faintly felt that the person holding me had been staring at me for a long time. After a while, he gently wiped my face. A soft sigh seemed to come from above. LinShan, who exactly are you? When I woke up, it was already 3 days later, and a female doctor was changing my bandages. I grabbed her hand. How did the battle at LinShan Pass go? What about the soldiers, are they all dead? The female doctor smiled and held my hand in return. Do not worry, young lady. We won. With His Highness there, no battle is unwinnable. Now that you're awake, I shall inform the Lord. I let out a sigh of relief. JinHong really came, and everyone was saved. The door knocked, and JinHong entered holding bloodstained armor. Thanks to your information, young Lady Duan, we used Qi JinHong as bait at the front, and I launched a surprise attack from behind, achieving a great victory at LinShan Pass. However, I glanced at the armor, understanding immediately. However, Qi JinHong and his deputy are missing, right? JinHong nodded towards me. If Qi JinHong was captured by the barbarian, the outlook is grim. I stared out the window, my heart as calm as still water. No need to worry, Your Highness. Qi JinHong is not dead. When I was trapped in the woodshed, I spent the night thinking and finally remembered someone. That delicate-looking deputy, she was the woman that Qi JinHong brought back to the general's residence in my previous life. She had red eyes, she is clearly a barbarian. Thinking of this, I turned to look at JinHong, and our eyes met in surprise. He had been gazing at me the entire time. He walked up to me, arms crossed. Interesting. How about you first tell me how you, in a state of unconsciousness, knew about all these events? I was taken aback for a moment but then put on a smiling face. I know much more. Is the Lord interested in hearing more? JinHong raised an eyebrow, indicating for me to continue. Send me back to the capital, and help me find someone. Simple enough, what can the young lady offer in return? I smiled and leaned in close to JinHong's ear, whispering, Doesn't you want to experience sitting on that high throne? Hearing my words, JinHong's lips curved into a smirk. He raised his hand to grab my neck and flipped me under him. LinShan, you really aren't afraid of death. Breathing heavily, JinHong's face loomed large before mine, and he lightly patted my cheek. But I like it. I accept your proposal. With the great victory at LinShan Pass, JinHong returned to the capital to report. Bringing the armor, JinHong personally escorted me back to the general's residence. Unable to bear the shock, my mother-in-law clutched the armor, crying hysterically, cursing me as a jinx in front of everyone, saying I caused the deaths of my parents and Qi JinHong. JinHong scanned the crowd with cold eyes before removing his thumb ring and handing it to me. LinShan, this item is bestowed to you by me. Seeing it is as seeing me. From now on, should you need anything, you can take it to my residence to find me. With a wave of JinHong's hand, a guard stepped forward. Mochuan, you will follow her from now on, ensuring her safety. If anyone gives her trouble, kill them. JinHong's indifferent glance struck fear into my mother-in-law, who immediately fell silent, her eyes brimming with poison as she looked at me. Before leaving, JinHong turned to look at me. LinShan, do not disappoint me. JinHong had just departed when the imperial decree arrived, similar to my previous life. Qi JinHong was posthumously honored, and my mother-in-law and I received titles, yet the emperor did not mention JinHong's great achievements. I was utterly perplexed. Without JinHong, the battle would have surely been lost. Why would the emperor, knowing that Qi JinHong almost destroyed tens of thousands of troops' lives, still bestow endless honors upon him? Could it be? My mother-in-law didn't see it that way, believing that I caused her son's death and yet still received a title, which was an outrageous injustice. Thus, she came to my courtyard daily to create trouble, but this time with Mochuan present, she couldn't stir up much noise. Soon, rumors spread in the capital that I was disrespectful to my in-laws and defied my elders, making me a notorious figure seen as an ominous lone star by the public. Xiazhu was furious and wanted to confront them, but I remained indifferent. The higher they rise, the harder they fall. Let them enjoy their short-lived happiness. I am eager to see if they will still laugh as happily when I drag them down from their pedestal someday. I spent the whole day in the garden tending flowers and plants, while having Mo Chuan monitor my father-in-law and mother-in-law, all the while waiting for Qi JinHong to appear. After waiting for more than half a year, Mo Chuan reported that my mother-in-law had loaded a cart full of things and sneaked out of the city under the moonlight. I followed her out. I trailed behind and watched my mother-in-law's carriage head south. An hour later, it stopped at the entrance of a small courtyard outside the city. After looking around nervously, she knocked on the door stealthily. Not long after, someone peeked out and opened the door. My mother-in-law hesitated, then rushed in crying, and that person quickly welcomed her inside. I looked up at the scene. Living in such a dilapidated alleyway, how could Qi JinHong tolerate it? Before long, I heard suppressed sobs coming from the courtyard, implying a touching reunion between mother and son. I stood coldly at a distance, watching everything unfold. Qi JinHong, long time no see. Are you ready to go to hell in this lifetime? Madam, as you said, there indeed is a woman in the courtyard, and she seems to be pregnant. I observed for a few days and heard the general call her Yunxi. I nodded, slowly sipping the good tea sent over by Shinhan a few days ago, listening to everything Mo Chuan had found out. Indeed, in the previous life they had 3 children, and by the time's calculation, it was about time for the eldest to be conceived. I squinted slightly, wondering if those 3 children would have the fate to be born in this lifetime. Just as I thought that, Xiaozhu hurriedly ran in. Miss, just as you said, the old madam is indeed preparing to enter the palace. What should we do? I put down the osmanthus cake in my hand and casually brushed off the crumbs. The pastries are indeed terrible. Xiaozhu, take the pastries, let's go pay our respects to the old madam. Xiaozhu, carrying the osmanthus cake, trotted along behind me. When we arrived at Emerald Bamboo Courtyard, we ran into my mother-in-law who was about to leave, neatly dressed. I intercepted her with a cheerful smile. I pay my respects to mother. On such a hot day, are you wearing your court dress to enter the palace and meet the emperor? Ever since mother-in-law learned that Qi JinHong was still alive, she visibly brightened up and began to extort money from me daily under the pretext of offering sacrifices to Buddha for my sins, even shamelessly asking for my dowry. In the previous life, I believed their words, thinking myself to be an unlucky person, so I obediently flattered them. In this life, I would naturally not be so foolish. If they had confessed everything, we could have parted peacefully. However, their greed knew no bounds, even attempting to take my dowry. Naturally, I refused, and my mother-in-law completely turned hostile. Unexpectedly encountering me today, she glared at me with annoyance. Do I need to report to you wherever I go? I smiled gently. Mother's words are true, where mother goes is naturally your freedom. Just that, a few days ago, I received some nice pastries and specially brought them for mother to taste. Glancing at the coarsely packaged osmanthus cake, my mother-in-law turned away disdainfully and shoved me aside, walking forward. How dare you present such unpresentable things to me? Get out of my way, don't obstruct me. Watching her back, I sighed softly. So, mother doesn't like them. I thought you might, considering how often you walk outside the city. Her stride faltered. After a long time, she turned to look at me. I spread my hands slightly regretfully. Mo Chuan, since mother doesn't like them, deliver the pastries to Prince Shen instead. By the way, tell the prince about Qi JinHong being alive, he would find it quite interesting. Her face paled inch by inch, panic starting to show. What nonsense are you talking about? JinHong died in battle, everyone knows. There's no one outside the city. I looked at her innocently. Whether I'm lying or not, why don't we all go and see for ourselves? She was so angry she could hardly speak. If the emperor finds out about JinHong, what will happen to you? I slowly pulled out a freshly written letter of divorce. In that case, mother need not worry about any chastity archway. How about petitioning for a divorce instead? This is the divorce letter my husband wrote on the eve of his departure, fearing to implicate me. I believe it's best if mother presents it to the emperor. With the divorce letter, I would cut ties with the Qi family, and we won't trouble each other anymore. If not, I don't mind a fish die or net split outcome. What do you think, mother? She was so livid at the sight of the still wet divorce letter that she couldn't speak, pointing at me in frustration until she fainted. I had someone press her acupoints vigorously to wake her up and then ordered Mochuan to escort her all the way to the palace. With no choice, she was left with no options. As desired, I obtained the divorce letter and forfeited the honorary title bestowed by the emperor. But I didn't care. The things of the Qi family would eventually be retracted by the emperor. That night, I began packing my dowry to return to Duan family. As my items were being moved out, my mother-in-law cursed vehemently. I shook a finger at her, signaling her to be quiet. Without the burden of filial piety, I suppose even if Madame Qi dies tragically tonight, it would have nothing to do with me. Mochuan stepped forward with a sword, and my mother-in-law reluctantly shut her mouth. Leaving the general's mansion, Xiaoshu still felt resentful. Miss, why don't we file a complaint with the authorities and charge Qi JinHong with polygamy? I tapped her on the forehead. Silly girl, marrying another is a minor offense, but deceiving the emperor is much more serious. The emperor's mind is unpredictable. If he discovered Qi JinHong was alive, we wouldn't escape unscathed. Better to get away from the general's mansion first. Then, what if the Qi family retaliates later? I pursed my lips slightly. Don't worry. Rats that can't face the light wouldn't dare provoke a cat in the sun. Besides, I hold a bargaining chip against them. A few days ago, I received a letter from Shinhan revealing that woman was indeed no ordinary person. When we returned to the Duan residence, my brother had just come back from the court. Seeing me open the door to greet him, my brother was both surprised and happy, and the fatigue on his face vanished completely. LinShan, why did you come so late today? Did your mother-in-law say anything? A pang of sorrow surged in my heart. My brother knew how hard my days were in the Qi family. He always handled everything at home himself, never wanting to trouble me in the slightest. Choking back tears, I told my brother about Qi JinHong. My brother was furious and wanted to confront them. I tightly gripped my brother's hand. Brother, I'm fine. I've long stopped wanting Qi JinHong. You should be happy for me. From now on, I'll need you to support me. I jokingly relied on my brother, and he tenderly wiped my tears, hugging me protectively. Don't worry, LinShan. With me here, you can stay in the manor with peace of mind. Even if you never marry, I'll take care of you. Reborn into this life, I'd never felt as relieved as I did at this moment. I let down all my defenses, collapsing into my brother's embrace and crying uncontrollably. My brother was my only family left, and this time, I was determined to ensure he lived well. Calculating the days, it had been more than a year since the Battle of LinShan Pass, and there didn't seem to be much time left until Shinhan and my brother's deaths. I sent Mochuan to pass a message to Shinhan asking to see him. After the grand victory at LinShan Pass, the emperor had allowed Shinhan to stay in the capital a bit longer. He was still in the capital at present. After everyone had retired for the night, I opened the window to get some air and found Shinhan silently appearing again in the large tree in the courtyard. Xiaoshu had been mysteriously taken away by her cousin, and Mochuan had gone to deliver food to my brother on night duty. The courtyard was left with only Shinhan and me. Annoyed, I opened the door and gestured for him to come in. Your Highness, can you enter normally next time? He always sneaked in like a thief, avoiding the front door and climbing trees instead. Shinhan didn't speak, but an unintentional smile appeared on his lips. Your Highness, are you about to leave the capital? Shinhan raised an eyebrow at me. The Emperor summoned me today, and you already know? I nodded, my expression serious. Did your Highness find the poisoner I mentioned last time? Shinhan shook his head. Not yet. I also privately consulted a physician, but there are no signs of poisoning in my body. I was puzzled. If it wasn't a chronic poison, could Shinhan poisoning have been caused by someone higher up? Leaving the capital this time could be dangerous. Your Highness must be very careful. I looked up and met Shinhan enigmatic eyes. He looked at me without moving, his smile deepening. Are you worried about me? I felt a bit perplexed. Of course I'm worried. Your Highness guards the southern borders and protects the people of Yu Kingdom. Not only I but all the people of Yu Kingdom are concerned for you. A trace of disappointment flickered in JinHong's eyes. Then he held my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. I understand. I will be cautious and return safely. Wait for me. My heart skipped a beat. It felt strange hearing him say that. What do I have to wait for? Before I could react, JinHong leaped and disappeared into the night. I turned to go back to my room to rest but heard a returning sound behind me. My mouth was suddenly covered from behind and I urgently wanted to shout. LinShan, it's me. Qi JinHong. Why was he here? After being exposed, Qi JinHong had escaped in the night with that woman, wandering and hiding everywhere. I signaled Qi JinHong to let go of me. After months of hiding, Qi JinHong looked much more haggard, his face unkempt and far from the confident young general he once was. See, without my silent endurance, where would their peaceful days come from? Qi JinHong, eyes reddening, clutched my sleeve. His tone was bleak, tears even appearing in his eyes, reminiscent of the grievances he suffered as a child. LinShan, did you plan our separation over JinHong? LinShan, we've been childhood friends. How can you do this to me? I didn't know what grievances Qi JinHong was talking about and found it amusing. Qi JinHong, then tell me how I should treat you? You married another woman and enjoyed a life of debauchery, while I served your parents, used my dowry to support your entire family, and remained a chaste widow for life? I pried Qi JinHong's hand off. Qi JinHong, I've never wronged you. It was you who wronged me first. Perhaps seeing the coldness in my eyes, Qi JinHong panicked completely. He pressed me onto the bed. LinShan, I don't believe you've become so heartless. We are husband and wife, and we haven't consummated our marriage. Today, let me make it up to you. Let's start over, okay? I struggled desperately, shouting JinHong's name for help. You said you didn't wrong me, but your heart is clearly with him. Qi JinHong aggressively covered my mouth, kissing my neck haphazardly. His incoherent declarations of deep emotions even mixed with a hint of crying at the end. Yet I only felt disgusted. I struggled to pull the hairpin from my head and stabbed it fiercely into Qi JinHong's shoulder. Blood stained his clothes, but Qi JinHong seemed unfazed by the pain and firmly restrained my hands. A tearing sound echoed as my clothes turned into shreds under Qi JinHong's hands, and I completely panicked. Mochuan should be on his way back, I just needed to buy some time. I kicked and punched Qi JinHong frantically, but he remained unmoved, pressing me down firmly while using one hand to tear off his own clothes. I whimpered in despair until the weight on me suddenly vanished. Qi JinHong was kicked away by someone. A coat scented with dragon musk floated down from above, covering my nearly unclothed body. My eyes welled up with tears. It was JinHong, he had finally arrived. I clutched the coat and huddled in a corner, the sounds of fists hitting flesh and Qi JinHong's grunts filling my ears. Before long, the room fell completely silent. After a long moment of silence, JinHong's careful voice sounded above my head. Duan LinShan, it's all right now. Trembling, I peeked out and saw Qi JinHong unconscious on the ground and JinHong looking at me with concern. JinHong extended his hand to me. I'm sorry, I came late. From now on, with me here, you have nothing to fear. I stared blankly at JinHong, but I didn't extend my hand. It was a sleepless night. JinHong sat quietly outside the door, keeping me company throughout the night. Why did you come back? Nothing really, I just suddenly remembered there were some things I hadn't told you. I remained silent, and JinHong talked on and on through the night. He spoke of the snowy north to the misty south, from the lonely desert to the setting sun over the long river. In JinHong's stories, I suddenly realized that everything he had seen was so distant and unreachable for me. I listened quietly to his rambling until dawn. After dawn, Qi JinHong was tied up and thrown at the gates of the Dali Temple, and the woman he had once sworn eternal love to was thrown into prison with him. Over the past half-year of being on the run, that woman's child had been lost, and she had greatly withered despite her young age. Now without the suppression of drugs, within days the woman's eyes would turn red, and Qi JinHong should understand what awaits them then. I hadn't intended to push them to the brink. Qi JinHong forced my hand. I sent all the information JinHong had gathered to the Dali temple. Chu Yunxi wasn't just an ordinary barbarian, she was a meticulously trained spy responsible for the siege and massacre in the previous life. It seemed that not just Qi JinHong, but the entire general's mansion was likely involved. As for me, due to our separation, I abandoned my title and was able to leave unscathed. Within just half a month, Chu Yunxi died in prison, the general's mansion was confiscated, and the entire Qi family was sentenced to exile 3,000 miles away. When the mansion was being confiscated, I made a special trip to the general's mansion. Returning to this place, I noticed that the heavy stone pressing on my heart had somehow already lifted. My mother-in-law was dragged away wailing, and my father-in-law screamed in protest of his innocence. I watched as the large plaque of the general's mansion fell heavily and shattered into pieces. The once glorious general's mansion disappeared completely, and the once proud young general fell silently like a shooting star. The day the Qi family was exiled, it coincided with JinHong's departure to the southern border. I went outside the city to see him off. As he mounted his horse, JinHong seemed reluctant to leave. Duan LinShan, wait until I return, I have something to tell you. I smiled as I saw JinHong off, watching calmly as his horse galloped away. I could roughly guess what JinHong wanted to say, but it all felt too unreal, as if it wasn't what I truly wanted. As I turned, I saw Qi JinHong being pushed by soldiers. The whip lashed mercilessly against his body, and I clearly heard the sound of his flesh tearing, but he gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound, only staring at me. Seeing me, my mother-in-law cried and knelt before me. LinShan, I knows I was wrong. Please show mercy and ask the prince to save us. Mother is old and can't endure this torment. Xiazhu stood in front of me with outstretched arms. Old woman, stop spouting nonsense. Where were you back then? You bullied our young lady, you deserve this. Upon hearing Xiazhu's words, Qi JinHong, who had remained silent, suddenly burst into laughter. Deserve it, I deserve this. With a fit of coughing, Qi JinHong suddenly coughed up blood, laughing maniacally as he looked at me, his eyes filled with both pain and hope. I turned and left with Xiazhu. 3,000 miles, Qi JinHong likely wouldn't survive the journey. But it no longer had anything to do with me. The wind behind me howled, as if someone was quietly weeping. I counted the days waiting for JinHong to return, only to receive news of his death on the battlefield. His body was transported back to the capital, and my brother was responsible for the funeral arrangements. Everything happened exactly as it did in my past life. I wasn't able to change anything. I couldn't believe it and begged my brother to let me see JinHong's body. His cheeks were dark, and there was blood at the corners of his mouth, clearly showing he died from poisoning. Tears fell onto JinHong's face, and I clumsily wiped them away. It's strange, I didn't want to cry, but why couldn't I stop the tears? JinHong, you fool. I told you someone would poison you, you're so smart, so why couldn't you prevent this? My brother wanted to report to the emperor, but I stopped him forcefully. Brother, have you thought about it? Now that the southern border is pacified and the whole empire is at peace, who would want the invincible general dead? I couldn't tell my brother that in the past life, after he submitted the memorial, he drowned and that I dared not claim the emperor wanted JinHong dead. An accomplished warrior might overshadow the ruler, even among close brothers there might be no acceptance. My brother was stopped by me and ultimately did not submit the memorial. The emperor was grief-stricken and ordered 3 days of mourning. I too sat at home in sorrow for 3 days. 3 days later, the emperor summoned me alone to the palace. This didn't happen in the previous life. By a strange impulse, I hid a dagger on my person. I knelt in the hall, not daring to lift my head, and the person on the throne said nothing. After a long time, he dismissed everyone and sighed softly. Duan LinShan, how long are you going to kneel? I raised my head, somewhat surprised. The way the emperor spoke was oddly familiar. I told you I had something to say when I come back. Did you forget? The dagger in my sleeve clattered to the ground, and I stared dumbfoundedly at the person in front of me, crying and laughing like a fool. After a moment, I wiped away my tears and smiled through them. Then speak, Your Highness. I am all ears. The person on the high seat stood up and walked towards me, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, extending the hand I failed to grasp last time. I heard someone yearns to see the snowy plains of the north and the misty rain of the south. Would you like me to accompany you? With tearful eyes, I extended my hand. So, let's go see it together. Spend the rest of our lives seeing the world, loving ourselves, and loving others.